Hey, before we get started with today's episode, I want to let you know that if you're planning for retirement or aren't sure where to start, we have a helpful checklist for you. We put together a guide called Your Pre-Retirement Checklist and have made it available for free on our website. This detailed checklist covers things pertaining to cash flow, Social Security, Medicare, asset allocation, and living a purposeful retirement. The link to download the checklist is listed in the episode description. Or you can go to wiserinvestor.com, scroll to the bottom, enter your email address, and then you'll have access to your pre-retirement checklist. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Wiser Retirement Podcast, where we cover financial topics such as retirement planning, tax planning, portfolio management, insurance, and estate planning, so you too can have a wiser retirement. I'm your host, Casey Smith. Guiding you to financial success is my co-host today, Brad Lyons. Hey, Brad.
Hi, Casey.
So, Dave Ramsey has many famous quotes now, especially recently, but he has one that has stuck with me for a long time. It's winning at money is 80% behavior and 20% head knowledge. And I feel like that's so true. Obviously too, I think the one that got him famous with financial peace was live like no one else today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. I think there's bumper stickers actually from a long time ago that I remember seeing those.
That's a great little play on words. You had to have listened to a couple of episodes of his to get it. But,
right.
Yeah.
Right. But the premise is, and people try to, armchair quarterback him all the time. He talks to mass audiences. So he's talking to millions of people every day through different variations of media and his program, Financial Peace. And even if you're not even struggling with money, I think Financial Peace course is a great refresher on how we should be using our resources. Most churches seem to be offering some type of that, or they're offer Crown. It's very easy to get access to that, and I think it's less than $100 to participate. But people try to armchair quarterback him a little bit and saying, well, not all debt's bad debt. It's okay to have this kind of debt or this kind of debt. And, when you're talking to not an individual, but you're talking to mass numbers of people, you have to do things to energize and mobilize millions of people. And for that case, he's done it. He's allowed, I would assume, million plus families to get out of debt. They have this campaign now on their social media showing, their age or how many days. So 18 months debt free, $60,000, $180,000, $200,000, and it's I think they do that. I'm sure to encourage others, because so much of our society right now is built on credit and payments. You can buy this dishwasher; it's only $20 a month for rest of your life, if you can find one. And so it's a principle that we've brought to our firm, that we believe that people should live debt-free lives. And, very often, I think there are some exceptions to that, but at the core of it, it's no credit card, no auto payment, house payment, 15 years or less, and it's and it could be a 30-year loan. That's fine. You just pay extra. And then by the time we get to retirement, though, which is what we're retirement planners, is you're debt free, right? And it's a road that we don't have to fight many people on. But I think last year there probably, in 2019 there were 4 or 5 families that really disagreed with that, and we convinced them to do that, and we got thank you notes. Was the market was plummeting 30% during the COVID crash, right? So it just makes sense. I mean, we talk about this through several of our podcasts. In fact, if you go to episode 66, you can see that enter retirement debt free. Episode 47, how do I retire without a mortgage? That's a good one to listen to as well. Episode 37, should I pay off my mortgage? If you don't believe me, we kind of debate all that through the process. But
the fact that we've talked about it in many episodes, really goes to the fact that it is part of our core belief system here.
Yeah.
Okay? And that it's not just a financial decision. Like I said, that's only 20%, according to what Dave Ramsey was saying, that getting out of debt and living debt-free is a behavioral issue. And so we have to spend more time dealing with that than just the finances. If we just put the numbers down on paper and expect everybody to do that, we're not encompassing with the behavioral aspect. And so we're going to talk about it again today, and we're going to talk about it probably in future episodes as well.
I answered the phone a couple weeks ago, and there was a young lady. She was a psychologist, and she had started making a reasonable amount of income, and she wanted to start saving for her retirement, which good for her. Starting to think about her future. But she had about $28,000 in unsecured, credit card debt. My guess is interest rates probably nearly 20%, somewhere in there. There were the SkyMiles cards, that typically have higher interest rates. And I told her, I said, well, the market is not going to give you a 20% rate of return, or 12 guaranteed for sure. So you have to eliminate all that debt. Now, what are your minimum payments? And it wasn't horrible, a couple $100 a month, But I said, think about this. If you didn't have the credit card payment, then you'd be able to save more into a retirement fund for yourself. And I try to explain it this way is everybody wants to be, everybody wants to be rich. And I hate that word. I absolutely hate the word rich. It just makes me cringe because there's a lot of rich people out there, but there are less wealthy people out there. And rich is I make really good money and I spend most of it. Wealthy is I'm accumulating wealth. I'm building wealth. Rich, you see it. You see the car, you see the house, you see the trips, et cetera, et cetera. Wealthy, you don't see it. It's hidden. And wealthy could be, like literally a long time ago, the client no longer with us, so I can talk about him now. Overalls, chewing tobacco, driving a beat up Hyundai. I don't know how you pronounce that car name. And he had $3 million in assets, liquid assets, in a brokerage account, not counting house or anything else, right? That's wealth. It was hidden. You wouldn't have thought that if you saw him parked next to you at the red light, right?
Right.
So to become wealthy, you have to think like wealthy people think. And so if you have all this debt, you're making the banks rich, right? We talk about inequality and all these other things today, but yet no one's talked about financial behavior is one of the leading things toward wealth inequality is because people are stupid with their money, right? So if people quit being stupid with their money, they would accumulate wealth, but instead they're making the same old white guys more and more wealthy every single year because they keep taking out the credit cards. They keep taking out the loans, right? Because they got to have the stuff because they want to look rich. And so it's a fundamental flaw. We're starting to teach it in high school now. In my kids' high school, it's a private high school, but they use the Dave Ramsey teen program inside the school. But public schools, Marietta City schools, have adopted it as well. And so they're teaching financial literacy inside Marietta City schools. Is my understanding. I don't have any kids in Marietta City schools, but that's my understanding from my community members. But so I think it's a growing trend. I know that we've talked about it a little bit, even at Berry College. I sit on the board up at Berry College up in Rome, Georgia. 28,000 acres of beautiful land. If you ever want to make a trip to see it, usually it's one of the top 4 prettiest colleges in the country. But up at Berry, they have Beyond the Berry Bubble, and they talk a lot about like real life things as the kids get ready to graduate. But that's something that I feel like that in education, we need to build back in ethics. Like we took away all of our ethics classes out of business, and we wonder why over the last 20 years, ethics in business has degraded. And then we should be adding personal finance because in the end, you enter the world and it's there to get you, right?
Mm-hmm. Financial services companies as a whole, combined with the advertising community, have done a very good job of convincing people to take out more and more credit cards.
Yeah.
And to live a lifestyle based on credit.
Yeah.
So it's coming at
General-
us from a variety of sources of information.
General Motors was one of the first to do that.
Yeah.
They wanted to grow their sales, and they allowed people to take out notes and make payments on cars. And Mr. Ford was adamantly against it. He said, no, people shouldn't borrow to buy product, but eventually they had to do it in order to compete with sales and stay profitable.
Sure.
So it's again, it makes the establishment very, very wealthy. So now you have to change your mindset to think, how do I become wealthy? And part of it is staying in your lane. You got to stay in your lane, meaning live your wage, act your wage, I think is another Dave Ramsey quote, right?
Right.
So in order to do that, you have to be living below your means. You can't be taking things out to the max. And for the most part, I don't think our clients do that. But we meet younger generation that has a little different mentality. And a lot of it, depends too on your background. I feel like our best young people under the age of 30 that are savers and that are planning clients of our firm, if you ask them and really kind of dive into their lives, you realize that they grew up in situations where their parents didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, and if they got 2 nickels, they spent them. Where the younger people who had parents who of great wealth, they aren't as good savers because they don't feel the urge, right? So a lot of it has a product of your environment. If you're coming out of some type of financial adversity as a family, then I feel like you're more focused on saving and building wealth.
Well, I think a lot of it does go back to the kitchen table. Like how was money talked about within the family environment? Was it a stressful conversation?
Yeah.
Was there,
Yeah.
was it an educational type, when did the parents start allowing the kids to make their own financial decisions or not? And I think it's very interesting how we grow up in that environment relative to finances, because I think a lot of that is brought forward with us throughout the rest of our lives. And then is when we have to start dealing with the behavioral issues that come out of it, because you have the establishment of the behavior, but then with the money, the income, and the expectations comes the implementation of that behavior, if you will, that we have to discuss with clients from time to time.
And we've all done stupid things with money, and it's okay. It's like when you're in your 20s, you think you're invincible, and there's no end. So you spend your 30s paying for your 20s, and then you get it right in your 40s and you really start saving. I think that's kind of a normal pattern for a lot of people. Fortunately, for a lot of our clients, they have very high income, so they're able to compensate for that.
Yeah.
But a lot of America is not. And those aren't the people that are probably listening to our podcast. These aren't the people that are probably going to ever become our client. But in order to really change society and how we think about things, we have to get out of this rich person mentality and think very differently about it. And as it's something that I'm passionate about. But all we can do is help one person at a time as we come into contact with them and say, look, you got to think about your life a little bit differently, financial life a little bit differently. And I've done that before. I've had people reach out to me directly and say, hey, how do I become wealthy? And I was like, well, it's not luck. Typically, if you're starting from zero, you become wealthy by working hard, and saving a lot. And eventually all that compounds, but that first 10 years is pretty hard work.
Really, it's called deferred gratification, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I know. And it's a simple word that one we've heard many times, but when you apply it to money over long periods of time, it's very difficult for a person in their 20s to see putting away $100 in a paycheck into a 401k has value 40 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very difficult to see that.
Or even just that extra money going to your mortgage so that the mortgage is paid off. And the next thing you know, you paid off your mortgage in half the amount of time. And now you have all this extra cash flow, right? Because that's a big payment for most people.
Right.
And staying away from car notes. I think the average car note now is approaching $1,000 a month, I believe. I'll have to go back and look at that. It makes sense. About 10 years ago, it was $675 per car. So that means most families are spending over $1,200 a month on car notes. Now that'd be approaching nearly $2,000. And in Metro Atlanta, we drive nice cars. You pull up to the red light, you look around you. pretty nice cars.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
All those are car payments. I guarantee you. No one's writing checks, right? So it's something you have to think about when you're making these decisions. I'm about living life to its fullest. You know, it's kind of like
it's how we finance that life. And what has happened is, again, through a lot of advertising, a lot of consumerism, is that credit cards and loans are viewed kind of as another source of income. You ever notice that? Is if you kind of put it like that, we have our income from our earned income, but then these credit cards and these easy pay term loans are like another source of income that you can just tap into and draw out of it with seemingly no ramifications until that bill comes due.
Or they think that credit cards are your emergency reserve. You know, it's like, that's a great way to spiral out of control at that point. Because what if it gets really bad and you can't even make the minimum payment?
Yeah. I mean,
so then you're looking at some form of debt consolidation or potentially bankruptcy, right? And you didn't even have to be there. If you just put money in reserve. So anyway, let's kind of get rid of debt before you retire on that topic, before I get off my soapbox. But retirement is about cash flow. And we talk about this many, many times over many different podcasts that I mentioned earlier. But if you go into retirement, a lot of times people say, well, I'm not going to pay off my debt because my debt is costing me so little that I should get more from get more from the portfolio. And for most people, net worth less than 10 million, you're better off paying off that note, because most likely the probability of success of your retirement of not running out of money at age 95, which is our default plan, it almost always comes back. It's just better to eliminate the debt. Right.
Right.
And it's because if you don't have that $2,200 a month mortgage, but you have less in assets, yes, you're getting paid less from your portfolio, but that payment was not greater than the mortgage. So in the end, you net with more money in your pocket every month by having the mortgage eliminated.
Right. And we refer to that as your cash flow, your free cash flow, because now we're looking at eliminating some of these structured payments from your expenditures each month, which gives you the more ability to have more flexibility with your spending.
Yep.
Right. So, and in a balance sheet sense, when you pay off a debt using an asset, the balance sheet itself doesn't change. And I think people kind of look at it like, well, if I use an asset to pay off the debt, if I take this cash and pay off that debt, I'm going to have less overall. Not really. It's the same. It's a net for you.
And you're investing in real estate if you're paying off your house. Now, if you're paying off your debt, you're trying to get off the crack is what you're trying to do. I mean, I'm just thinking about Amex, and we don't have a whole lot of clients that come in with large amounts of credit card debt. So maybe we're talking to an audience that doesn't have any potentially, but people who do, and you can be a catalyst in their lives by encouraging them to straighten up, because they're doing harm to their financial lives in the long run.
And if they don't have it now, chances are good at some point in time in most people's lives, they did have some debt that was worrisome and concerning to them.
Yeah, sure.
And, getting out of that, they know how good that feels, and they can share that.
Yep. Yeah. Especially with their kids, with the next generation. If we can get this next generation to stay away from school loans and high interest credit card debts and start their lives off, debt free, not worried about what other people think about maybe their older model car or whatever, they're going to have a huge head start, because if they can put even an extra $100 a month in the 401k, that gets compounded so big going down, 30 plus years. They're instantly multimillionaires in the future.
If schools taught nothing more than compounded interest.
Oh no. A lot of people wouldn't have to go to college.
They would.
Seriously. I mean, you need to go to college to learn a trade and or learn especially something that you believe in. College just helps us be a little more open-minded about the world. And so my children don't know there's not an option. They think the 4-year degree is just another 4 years after high school. Right. But but seriously though, if you went to work just putting away 20% of what you made for 4 years, you'd be well ahead of some college people after they pay off their student loans and before they can start saving.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Studies have shown that, and it's not difficult, mathematically to bear out.
No, right? But you just don't know that when you're 20.
That's right.
That's the problem. You know everything, but you don't know that. So I think there's some, we have some people who come in who are very debt averse, and we have people who come in who are very comfortable making payments, and we see that sometimes because we'll clear the deck, and then the next thing you know, there's a truck loan and a RV loan, right? You got to clear the deck again. Fortunately, they're in positions where it's easy to do that, but there's you just have to look at any interest going to the bank is making the bank wealthy. If you want to make yourself wealthy, you have to think about things a little bit differently, right?
Right, and. You talked about, people clearing the deck of those payments, or they come in and they're comfortable making payments. This is one of the problems also. As a society, we're so comfortable with that debt payment. It's just baked into our budgets and has been for years and years and years that we accept it, and instead of rejecting it as we should. The point is that we want to begin sharing with our clients and with everybody through this podcast to reject that debt payment.
Right.
To say, I'm not going to do this anymore. And by doing so, you're going to eliminate that structured expense in your monthly budget. And you may not see it for a couple of months or several months or many months before it's done. But when it is done, you begin to realize that all that money that was being paid out, that you worked so hard for, was, again, going to what you keep saying, Casey, is making somebody else rich and wealthy.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, there's difference between debt. Some debt, you talked about mortgage debt, the ability to leverage a small down payment and pay off the rest over 15 years
right
into an asset that has value at the end of the term is good debt.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Debt where you pay for something that is a consumable item, dinner last Saturday night.
Yeah. Finance that for 12 months.
12 months. That's bad debt.
Right.
And it should be distinguished between the two. And then there's that gray area of debt that, we should talk about a little bit as well.
Talking about cars.
Student loans, cars, things that, we need to have and may not have the money to buy instantly.
Right.
But how do we manage that, and how do we pay it down as quickly as possible? Where do we prioritize it?
I had someone that really wanted to go to Berry College, knew that I was on the board of visitors, and asked if I would take a look at their overall situation. And basically they're going to have to go to Berry, but they're going to have to take out a loan of about $25,000 a year. So, Berry's tuition is around $60,000, but they have an endowment that's nearly $1 billion, and they're very generous with student grants and scholarships, things like that. And so I think the average student is probably paying around $36,000, somewhere in there. So $25,000 loan was what the net was, or they could go to Kennesaw State. And, I'm not a huge fan of KSU necessarily, but, I think that a KSU education, while inferior to a Berry education, I believe, is better debt-free than a Berry education with loans.
Paying for college is an investment in our future. So we need to look at the return on your investment. That's kind of where you're getting as well.
Yeah. And here's the whole problem with that is that you go to take out a school loan, and this is what I think should happen. This is the average earnings for the first 10 years.
Point. Yeah. Is $100,000 in debt going to be you're going to get enough of a return of income to make that, work, or going to KSU in this example without debt. Okay. And then what's the return on that investment? And
Absolutely.
You compare those two as a return on investment to make the decision.
They were doing this back when I was in flight school back in 2002. flight school loan would be about $100,000. And in the brochures, they would tout, well, but you're going to make $300,000 as a pilot. So this is easy loan. Well, what actually happens, it's a little different today because there's a huge pilot shortage, which I think is a great career track if anyone's interested in that right now, if you're in your 20s. But back then, you'd come out and go to a regional airline. You get paid $14,000 to $18,000 for your first year, but you have $100,000+ student loan. Imagine, that minimum payment, right? And then what makes matters worse is that people would meet their spouses in flight school, get married. Now you've got $200,000 of student loans, right? So you've got all these huge payments, and you're only making $18,000. Next year you might make $30,000. Third year might make $45,000. Then hopefully you upgrade to captain. Then you're only making about $60,000 to $80,000, right? So you're never making what you're doing. You're trying to get to the majors. You're trying to get from the regional carrier to Delta, United, American, Alaska, Southwest, right? And then there's Spirit, Frontier. All those are out now that didn't really exist back then. But the bottom line is that there are people you couldn't default on it, right? You can't default on a student loan. No way to clear it either. So they were getting all kinds of special arrangements, through the loan program to defer it, but then interest is accumulating. And the bottom line is that if they had been told, they could have done something different. And if you're a history major and you go to Harvard and you come out with a Harvard undergrad as a history major and you're making $30,000 a year, but your Harvard loan is $150,000, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And so that's what there's actually a website. I wonder if it's still up. I saw it years ago, but you put in what your education cost and what your major was going to be, and it would tell you your jobs, and you could choose a track and say the average wage. And so it's predatory lending is how I see it. And so there should be disclosures. Now, just like in our industry, Brad, there's all kinds of disclosures for the bad actors in what we believe is bad actors in our industry, but they can do their bad acting if they give you enough disclosures. And it's the same. It would be the same way over there. But I'm a firm believer you leave with no college debt, that a college education the ROI is so undefinable. And unless it's maybe a more defined career field, like in aviation, there are published rates of what people are getting paid. It's very easy to find. Fly for food, I think, is one of the websites that documents pilot
have
pay
some
rates.
Of these conversations with passengers. Right? It's okay for pilots to have them with one another.
Another one is probably doctors. Your son, right? Yeah. He's got pretty big student loans.
Yeah, it's a pretty big nut, I'll tell you what.
But he also has a pretty well-defined income track going forward, right?
Right.
Even attorneys, people are like, oh yeah, these attorneys. Just because you have a law degree doesn't mean you make anything. You'd be amazed how many poor attorneys are out there. But unless you get into the higher specialties, right? Then I think it changes things. But anyway, again, another soapbox from me, but if you have a student loan, then I think you stop all saving and you go and you eliminate it.
Exactly. And I had a young man in a while back, and he had considerable amount of student loan. And I advised him, and we talked about it. We had a very frank conversation about this, to get rid of the fancy car he had, move back in with his parents for a while, and just throw as much money as he can at this student loan debt.
Clearly, the parents are not part of the meeting.
No, they weren't. I mean, that's the conversation he's going to have with them.
Right.
But nonetheless, it just shows that, student loan debt is a $1.5 trillion elephant.
Yeah, right.
Around them. And it defers their lives going forward. It defers decision-making going forward for them. Marriage, those that may want to start a business, but they're saddled with student loan debt that banks won't loan them any money to do so. So it restricts them in their ability to move forward and be completely free of other decisions that are holding them back from what they want to do.
Living in the South, we're accustomed to reasonable housing prices. Housing has gone through the roof.
Yes, it has.
I wouldn't
That's
even
gonna
buy
be
my own house at what it appraises for.
right. And this is creating something I call housing insecurity for people who aren't in the housing market.
But think about this. Our listeners, think about this. Go back to when you graduated college. Some of you probably lived in an apartment for a couple of years, but you eventually got into a house. I was very fortunate. I got into got into a townhome with the help of my parents. But it was a $2,000 gift to help me put a down payment on my first townhome. You know what that gift has to be today for your first townhome? I mean, probably something around $20,000 to $30,000
Right.
is what that gift has to be today. And we're hearing that from our clients now. They're saying, hey, we need to start a fund to help them not have to live in an apartment, but help them live in their own home, to give our kids a little boost after college.
Right.
And
So,
you
as
think
long as
about,
we're on this topic, this whole idea is a spiraling downward
Yes.
event,
So-
because as rents go up, they're paying more and more and more in rent,
yeah,
deferring the amount that they could save
correct.
for buying a home.
So think about this: you left college, you meet your spouse, you want to get married, and what are you going to do? You have you're saddled with this huge student loan debt. Then the housing prices are so high, you can't save enough for that. So that's where a lot of people are sitting right now is like, well, we're going to go to the apartment, but the apartment rents are increasing at a rather rapid rate, partially because they're looking for their ROI, right?
Absolutely.
And they're paying more for the real estate structure now.
Right.
So it's I think coming out debt free is probably the best gift you can give yourself or give others.
Right. And that doesn't mean that the student has a free ride here.
No, not necessarily.
For example, I worked while I went to school. I worked during the summers to earn income. My kids all had summer jobs and worked some during school year. I'll share with you one job I had during college. It wasn't so bad. I waited tables at a sorority house.
Well played, Brad.
I thought so.
How'd that work out for you?
Well, I was a college student. I was learning.
Oh, gotcha.
So not all college jobs have to be terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
That was way cooler than mine. I was like a research analyst for a finance professor.
Ugh.
I know, right? I thought I was doing the smart thing, but I didn't know about the sorority house restaurants.
You should have called me.
Yeah. I think you were long out of college by the time I figured that out.
I still would have taken that call and advised you the same way.
But yeah, so we got to stay debt free, and I think that's true all the way through. That's all the way through into and through retirement as well. We want to avoid saddling yourself of payments. You want to build up wealth and have that wealth work for you, and that doesn't have to be inside a brokerage account. It could be a real estate property where someone's paying you rent.
Right.
You become the person that's becoming wealthy because you're deriving income from whatever it might be. We have had a few conversations in the last year with people who rent out their RV. So they bought an RV and they put it up on RV Share, and they're getting like $250 a night.
Oh, that's become huge. It's with boats too.
Yeah.
On lakes.
Rent
Absolutely.
boats.
Yeah. You could go rent somebody's boat the same way that you could do an Airbnb or a VRBO with a home. You can do that with a boat, with a car, car rental sharing.
Yeah.
So there's many ways now to derive other sources of income that had never been explored in the past. So
imagine
it's
if that's
utilizing those lazy assets, as we refer to them sometimes.
Imagine if that's a debt-free asset, and that's real cash flow income. But worst case scenario, if you're stuck with the debt, that might be a good way to
help pay it off.
To help pay it off, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, we talk about good debt versus bad debt. I have an exclusion. Dave Ramsey would disagree with me, but I say if your primary home is paid for, or if it's on track to be paid off within that 15-year time period, you're not carrying any other debt, and you now have this opportunity money. Like, I have this extra cash flow, or I have this extra account. I don't really know what to do with it. I think it's always a good time to buy vacation rental properties. I really like those. If you become the slumlord, as I say, and you buy I don't think the $80,000 house exists, but typically that's what you would do. Buy $80,000 house, you're renting it out for $600-800 a month. The yield's really good. Those don't exist anymore. So you talk to Tom Townsend. We've had him on with Keller Williams. We've had him on several podcasts, and he says, no, the play now is you buy the house, you rent it out, but then you're going to make money on the appreciation. I was like, I heard about that in 05 and 06. So that makes me a little nervous, but certainly, if you think about a vacation rental property, you're renting by the week or even the night potentially. And then as rates go up, and all the hotels are going up now, you have the ability to increase your rate as well. And so you're able to kind of protect your yield. And then typically those properties will hold their value, but it's all local. So it depends on where you are. Panama City during the financial crisis, I think they were trying to give things away. Hilton Head, it dropped a little bit, but it held its value. Sea Island held its value. So you have to be strategically careful about what you're doing. I was down over spring break just for a couple of nights. I passed through Watercolor in Florida. Cheapest house in the neighborhood was $4.3 million. Beachfront was $13 million. And there's these college spring breakers and high school spring breakers converging. And I wanted to do nothing but leave. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And all I could think about was like, well, I mean, they're renting the places out. So they're getting a good amount of money off of these properties, I guess. There's not a place that I would invest $1, but maybe it's different during a different time of year. Now, if you go down further down 30A, maybe it gets a little better. Find an older community, maybe. Rosemary.
Well, there's
maybe.
certain truths in this world, and investing in real estate, there's one of them. It's all about location.
Very true.
And that has never changed.
No, very true. And there's, I've studied different parts of Florida when it comes to real estate rentals, and I think there's some opportunities there, especially towards South Florida. And hopefully with all the mask mandates and things getting better with COVID, we'll get our Canadian snowbirds back and be able to rent places out that way too. But I think that to take on a mortgage and your mortgage is being covered by short-term rentals, I think that is a great opportunity. But you still have to make sure that in your budget, that if you couldn't rent for some reason, that you could still make the mortgage payment.
That's right. You still have to consider all the possibilities. Okay, which means you may have to set aside money sitting there in the event that something should occur.
Yeah.
New roof.
Right.
The heater blows out. The air conditioning goes out. Something that just an emergency fund that you can cover immediately so that you can meet that next renter's, deadline.
Correct.
Coming up.
Yeah. Well, the house would be inside an LLC, and you would have reserves built into that in case something like that happened. But I have one property that I do this with, and COVID, we didn't rent it out. I had to come out of pocket for it for a few months. And then all of a sudden just the floodgates opened and I doubled my nightly rate and people kept paying it. So I pushed it up more and people kept paying it. So there's opportunity out there. You have to be looking for it. But again, that's if you don't have any other debt. Right. You're looking for opportunities outside of traditional stocks and bonds.
Right. We wouldn't recommend that they buy the investment real estate and mortgage their own home.
No.
If they had those resources, we tell them to pay off your house, your primary residence, and mortgage the investment price. Because a great deal of investment real estate is tax oriented as well. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that you're putting down as little as much as possible, and thereby you're actually increasing your return on investment. Right. Because your investment is simply the down payment, which is
most people are not deducting the interest on their mortgage. It's amazing how many people think they are, but they're not.
Not anymore.
Most people cannot get above the standard deduction.
That's right. That's right.
So in that case, there's no benefit to having. There never was a benefit to having a mortgage for interest or tax purposes. If you pay $10,000 in interest, you're not getting $10,000 off on your tax return. You're paying $10,000 in interest, you might be getting $3,000 off in your tax return. So I'd say just pay the full tax return. It's going to be less than the $10,000 in interest.
But you go back to the 90s, and I had a mortgage in the 90s. And interest rates were in the 10% range, and tax rates were much higher as well.
Right.
So that was a benefit. I mean, you had to have the home, you had to borrow the money, so at least you got the benefit. So they talked a lot about the after-tax cost of your mortgage in that time frame. Okay. Now, interest rates changed, and so you don't hear so much about the after-tax cost of margin or of your mortgage anymore. But mindsets are set years and years ago for
This
a
is
lot
how
of
it
people.
is. Read an article in the 90s and you think it's still current.
That's right.
But on a investment property though, you're generating income, but you also depreciate that house. I believe it's over 29 years. So you have that home purchase divided by 29 years, or investment property, could be commercial. And then you have all your deductions. So
Right.
you would deduct the full amount of interest, the full amount of repairs and maintenance against the income. So whatever you're spending is offset, it helps offset the income. So potentially you're mostly tax-free income that's coming from the property.
Right. So it's a
Through the
huge tax play.
depreciation.
Right.
So yeah, you're not. It's kind of like if you're not getting more money off your taxes because you own an investment property. You own an investment property that's getting very tax efficient income. It's how you have to look at it.
Right.
You think I'm going to buy investment property, I'm going to save all this money. You're able to write off expenses against the income. That's how that works. But also you have the price appreciation. So if the price goes up in your rental property and you want to sell it, so you sell it, now you can do what they call a 1031 exchange, which we have another podcast about that. Search for 1031 exchange in our podcast list. But you can do a 1031 exchange. You can sell that property and take your gains, take your cost basis, right, and move it to another property, no tax. You just roll it into the next investment property. And there's a whole process to do that with. So you have to be very careful. It's almost like you have to claim it before you do it.
Right. And you need good counsel to walk you through that as well.
Yeah, it takes an intermediary. It's not just a form you fill out. There's a whole process to it. But again, that's building wealth. That's why you don't have the big car payment. Buy an older car, put the extra savings into a savings account to build this opportunity fund to go out and do things like this. This is how you become wealthy. It's not the car. The car makes you look rich, right? So it's a mindset. It's behavior. It's how you think about things.
Right.
People and there are people who live a very rich life who are also wealthy, but they're hard to spot because you don't know the difference. So stop comparing yourself.
And that rich lifestyle isn't cutting into their wealth.
Correct. Yes. Yes. We know people putting away $30,000 a month, and they live very great life, but they're saving $30,000 a month in addition to all their 401k stuff at their job, right? Those are rich people living like rich people. I hate that word. And then people who are also building wealth at the same time. And those are very few. Most people just look rich. And I feel like in our communities. So if you want to pay off debt, it's a very straightforward process. And if you're struggling with that, you listen to this, maybe my excitement in my voice, hopefully you've heard it. It says, yeah, I'm going to get rid of this debt. You can email us. You can email us at education@wiserinvestor.com. We'll send you a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet that you can build out all the debts that you owe and help you come up with a snowball method to pay off those debts. So it'll give you a date. All you have to know is how much you owe, the interest rate, the minimum payment, how much extra you can send, and it'll help you calculate that. It's hard to find good tools out there, and we really should probably build that into our website somehow. But for now, we just have a really good Excel spreadsheet that we'd be happy to email you. Just when you send to education@wiserinvestor.com, you get all of us here at the same time. We get all the advisors, we all see it, and we'll respond with that. But snowball method is you pay off the smallest balance first. I love this concept. Dave Ramsey has made it very popular. I don't think he did not invent it, but it's something he's made very popular. And that's because if you owed $500 and you owe $50,000, you go after that $50,000 card because it has more interest, but man, you lose interest.
Right.
No pun intended. But you lose interest because you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to take me 2 years to do this.
Exactly. Because we're working the behavioral side of the equation as well.
Right.
And plus, if you make an extra payment on that $50,000, that could have gone towards the $500 debt and paid it off. We're looking at changing lives.
Right.
Okay. Paying off one debt begins to change your life.
Yep.
Whereas
You get
paying
excited
off
about
the
it.
largest amount, with extra dollars, the next month it's still there.
That's right.
Until you haven't paid it off. So when you start paying off debts one by one, you begin changing your life and your behavior at the same time.
Start with the smallest balance, get the quick win. Go for the quick win. It's the chip shot.
Right.
Right. We're not trying to hit the hole in one. We're trying to hit the chip shot.
Right. And then you take that money.
Yep.
And you begin applying more money
To the-
same money
To the next biggest
debt.
one.
Right.
Yeah. So if that payment was $50 a month, you paid off that debt, you take that 50 and you apply it to the next debt, and you keep doing that. And again, our calculator can walk you through that. Now, sometimes it might be advantageous to do the avalanche method. Avalanche is where you pay the highest interest off first, and then you, because that in the end, typically that saves the most money. But again, can you stick with it? And you there's a little toggle switch. You can toggle between snowball and avalanche and see which one's better. Big thing is you win. You got to be a winner. And I like the snowball because you can just get it paid off. Now, what you don't want to do is what most people do is to take a shotgun approach to it. There's no calculator for the shotgun approach because no one's done any math. So in the shotgun approach, it's simply I send an extra $100 to the mortgage. I send an extra $50 to the credit card. I send an extra $25 to the car note. Right. And then I save in my 401k, like 4 or 5%. And then I put, and then, I put into savings, $100 a month. That's the shotgun approach. And you're going to get nothing. You're going to get a little fragments here and there. And,
Right.
and that's not how you do this. There's a book. It's one on Dave Ramsey's reading list. It's a very small book. It's a very silly book, but it's called Rhinoceros Like Success. And I decided one day I'd read all the Dave Ramsey recommended reads because they weren't written by him. They were written by other people. And so I went through and that book is like, I read it on a plane ride, I think. But basically the book refers to everything as a rhinoceros. What would a rhinoceros do? And I learned a lot about rhinoceroses. But anyway, they charge. We know this. And they lower their head and they charge for one thing. They don't run around with their heads cut off, right? They just literally
Straight line,
lower their heads and they scoop you up, right? So that's how you have to go about paying off debt. You take all your resources, you focus on that one debt and you eliminate it. So if you have student loans, you have 401k savings that's going in, don't try to be saving, go after that student loan, eliminate that student loan. You do need to have an emergency reserve. You do need to have, he says $1,000. I think that's like so early 2000s.
very.
You probably need about at least $5,000. I can't think of $1,000 that solves any problems.
I think I could buy a set of tires.
I don't know if you get anybody to come out and even look at your roof for $1,000. But look at it as, that reserve is built. And then after that, all your resources go to eliminate whatever the goal is. And life's a lot like that too. We get very scattered and sometimes we have to recenter ourselves and say, okay, this is the most important thing. I have to be an adult and take care of these other things, but I got to go and tend to this first. This is my main priority. And so the same way with finances. If you want to pay off mortgage sooner, let's say you don't have any dumb debt. We don't have any student loans. We don't have any credit card debt. But we do want to make sure our mortgage is on track. You can go to wiserinvestor.com/mortgage-calculator, and you can input your current mortgage, and you'll be able to calculate when that mortgage gets paid off. And then you can put in, hey, I want to send an extra $100 a month or $500 a month, and it'll change your payoff date. So that's something we do in our financial planning process is we're going to make sure that you're getting your payoff date on your mortgage is well before your retirement date.
Right. Because it also shows how much you saved overall, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. You think you're paying more, but in the end, you're ultimately paying less because it'll calculate, had you instead made all these payments at the certain rate,
right?
Okay, how much are you saving in interest?
Everyone's surprised by that. I've seen numbers as high as $80,000.
Right.
By sending an extra $1,000 a month, they're going to save $80,000 in interest.
Right. Which they would have never made.
No.
No. In an accumulation sense.
So that's $80,000 that rich white guy at the bank has less in his pocket, and it's more that you get to keep in your pocket,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, it's math.
Yes.
It's all math, right?
Yeah.
But we get so caught up in the lifestyle and we have to have and things of that nature. You got to take a step back and say, how do I become the bank? How do I become, how am I able to do things? And you know what? And maybe we've talked about this from a very selfish standpoint, because what we've talked about is, well, there's more for you. There's more for you. But you know what? You can, if you do this process, you can also be a great blessing to other people, right? If you want to make an impact in your community, it doesn't start with credit card debt and mortgages and car loans. If you want to impact your community, you do that through a sense of, from a position of strength, and financial strength is what you're going to have is a foundation. So you think about your children, your grandchildren. In order to encourage them and help them financially, you have to be strong financially yourself. So you have to put yourself in that position for the future, right? So, well, I could keep talking about this forever because I'm very passionate about that people make change, especially in this area. But I think we'll leave it here, Brad. And again, if something that you struggle with or something you have questions about, or hey, if you want to beat us up with your opinion of why you should carry debt, send us an email at education@wiserinvestor.com, and you probably get a response from me or Brad or Matthews.
That's right.
All right, Brad, good conversation.
Thank you.
We'll see you.
Thanks for listening to a Wiser Retirement podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, that way you don't miss any new episodes. We would also appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed today, head to wiserinvestor.com and reach out. We would love to hear from you. This episode was produced and edited by Lilton Moore. Wiser Wealth Management Incorporated is a registered investment advisor. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor and/or tax professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.